the last 10x, might require this collaboration to go from 100 megagas per second to 1 gigagas. And
we have seen from partners like Tycho that this is incredibly difficult to do in production. So we're really trying to make it, out of the box to where these popular rollup stacks can do this multi-proof system as soon as possible.
How are we making Ethereum an institutional-friendly protocol? Welcome back to the Rollup.
This is your home to learn from the biggest guests, the brightest minds at the tip of innovation.
Our goal is to help spread the collective knowledge of everyone in our community.
We are breaking crypto out of its echo chamber and taking it to the real world.
Alrighty, Justin, welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
Hey.
It's been a while.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely.
So Justin, I want to kick you off with a question. I've been around in the ZK space. I've been like a novice. I did some research for about like 4 years now. And I remember your name from these early like ZK days. I saw you in group chats snooping around ZK tech and whatnot. I want to know like sort of what got you so bullish on ZK in the first place? And then clearly, I think over the last 12 months, you've been going pretty hard in advocating for this technology. What sort of brought you back into the fold of being bullish on ZK?
Yeah, so I got into ZK in the days of Zcash. I looked it up. Zcash was launched in October 2016. And just a few months later, in mid-2017, I wrote this article talking about Ethereum, which was basically taking Ethereum, adding all of the ZK tech, and hence the name Z as a hat tip for Zcash. And one of the ideas that I had was let's just sync the whole history by verifying one snark. And then another idea was let's just have one single opcode, this universal opcode that would verify a snark, and that would be flexible enough for all of the smart contracts. When I wrote this article, I sent it to Elie Ben-Sasson, and he invited me to a conference in Tel Aviv that he organized. And it was kind of this surreal experience where one thing led to another. And on day 2 or something, I was having dinner with Zuko, Vitalik, and Elie, and a bunch of other people who later became founders of Starkware. And that was even before I joined the Ethereum Foundation. I was just lurking around. And part of my curiosity was piqued because I just found it so mind-blowing that you could take computation, just prove it in a very succinct proof, but also kind of hide the inputs and have privacy. And then to a large extent, what happened is that I joined the Ethereum Foundation and worked on all sorts of other problems unrelated to snarks because the technology was not mature enough. But I think we're now reaching a point where finally the technology, kind of 8 years later, is mature enough. And Vitalik had this item in his roadmap with the merge, the splurge, the verge, etc. One of which was let's snarkify everything, snarkify all of the things, and basically snarks solve a lot of our remaining open questions. So one of the big ones that I'm working on right now, snarkifying the L1 EVM, that gives us 2 things. One, it allows us to dramatically increase the gas limit. I talk about the gigagas frontier, which is 1 gigagas per second on the L1 EVM. It also really helps with decentralization. The validator sets can now be verifying proofs of validity on much smaller and weaker devices that they have today. So the meme that I'm pushing forward is the Raspberry Pi Pico, which is a $7 piece of hardware, an order of magnitude cheaper than the Raspberry Pi, and that should be sufficient to participate as a validator and consensus participant on Ethereum. Going back to the roots of Zcash, there's actually this very exciting thing called a privacy wormhole. So the idea here is to have privacy at L1, where the way that you opt in is by sending funds from an Ethereum address to another Ethereum address, which is provably unspendable. So from the point of view of the blockchain, it looks like a normal transaction, but actually you've just, in some sense, destroyed the balance associated. And the way that you would have your funds be recreated is by submitting a proof of burn, so proof that your funds were sent to an unspendable address, and that could allow us to have privacy at L1. Snarks also help us with composability. I've been talking about this idea of the united chains of Ethereum, where instead of having fragmented and siloed L2s, we can have them all come together, even with the strongest form of composability, which is known as synchronous composability. That's something that we're going to see more and more as the tech matures. And another very exciting thing I'm excited about is this idea of removing the security councils for the L2s. One of the big reasons why we have security councils and governance is because first of all, there's bugs in the software. It's very complicated. And two, if you want to remain EVM equivalent, you need to have the governance to stay in sync with the L1 EVM, which is itself an evolving beast. So there's this notion of a native rollup, and we're going to have vast amounts of L1 gas, which the L2s are going to be able to reuse, and by construction is going to be bug-free and EVM equivalent, so you won't need the security councils and you won't need the governance. And then another thing that I'm very excited about, just a final point, is post-quantum security. So today, if you look at L1, we have various places where we use non-post-quantum secure cryptography, specifically BLS for the aggregation of signatures and KZG for the blobs. And both of these primitives can be replaced by snarks, which are post-quantum secure.
Introducing Extended exclusively on Starknet, a next-gen perps trading platform live today. With 50+ trading pairs from crypto to TradFi, you get the best experience on-chain today. Deposit in the community vault for attractive returns, EMV compatible, and engage in unified margin, spot trading, lending, and perps trading. Exclusively live at extended.app on Starknet today. Justin, when you're thinking about the implementation of some of the actual details and these actual mechanics for Ethereum L1, and I kind of started this before you came up, speaking about how it was great that the Ethereum Foundation has really kind of taken this approach of using the amazing work that some of the teams like Boundless and others have done. When you're thinking about actually implementing this work, how do you envision the collaboration between the Ethereum Foundation and teams like Boundless to actually get this type of progress forward to help the Ethereum roadmap accelerate? Everyone always wants faster. You know that better than anyone else. But just generally, how do you view this kind of collaborative effort actually unfolding?
Yeah, so all of these teams that are external to the Ethereum Foundation are helping in two ways. First of all, in terms of performance, they're constantly coming up with new innovations, and they're learning from each other as well, which means that they're lifting all boats and moving at an extreme pace, roughly 5 to 10x per year of performance improvement. And that is absolutely fantastic. And it's something that DEF could not even dream of or even think of paying for just a few years ago, and now we're in some sense getting it for free, paid by the VCs in some sense. The other amazing things about the diversity of the ZKVMs is security. So these pieces of software are complex. We are assuming that each individual ZKVM has critical bugs, has vulnerabilities. And the way we hedge against that is in the exact same way that we have client diversity for the consensus layer clients and the execution layer clients. And the great news is that we actually have more diversity at the ZKVMs than we do for the EL and CL clients, which is kind of remarkable because you'd think that a ZKVM is a much more complicated beast than a CL or an EL client. So we're in this very luxurious position. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does.
I wanted to plus one on ZKVM diversity. I think we've realized this as well. Like, working with Zero and moving over to Boundless, that we just need many ZKVMs to make these systems, practical to secure tens of billions of dollars in production. And something we're really focused on at Boundless I hope to, soon have an offering to deploy a rollup with 3 ZKVMs, so all at the same time. We have seen from partners like Tycho that this is incredibly difficult to do in production. So really trying to make it, out of the box to where these popular rollup stacks can do this multi-proof system as soon as possible.
Jacob, you mentioned $10 billion. I'm thinking $10 trillion. So on Ethereum today, we already have $1 trillion of assets if you count ETH and all of the other assets. We're planning for much bigger numbers.
Yeah, I agree. I do have this internal saying, it's brick by brick, right? We're going to hit one milestone. We hit 1/10 of a cent to prove an ETH transaction. I think we're about 1 billion TVL right now securing ZK Tech. Let's build it up and compound that success.
Yeah, and in the article that I wrote 8 years ago, one of the lines was in the last few years, we've seen incredible orders of magnitude improvements in performance. So even back then, we were on this exponential curve. And when you think back then, a single Zcash transaction would take minutes to even produce. And now we're at a point where in a matter of seconds, we can prove entire blocks. And as you said, it costs about 1 cent, where an individual transaction is either a 10th or 100th of a cent.
Yeah, it's really incredible to work alongside these other teams and sort of adopt this RISC-V standard that we originally came up and just see this compounded success. Seeing incredible numbers recently from, for example, Zisk, which is the team 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗵𝗵 is leading right now. They've given over a 20x improvement for everyone's executor, and they've open sourced it from the beginning, which is just incredible for the community. And then super excited about Airbender as well, where they're posting industry leading numbers right now. On top of I think Rizero is cooking some things as well.
Another thing that the ZKVM teams have been very useful at is illuminating the right path forward from a design and architecture's perspective, especially the 𝗍𝗳. And you're right, Rizero was literally the pioneer that brought RISC-V, and now it's an industry standard. And from our perspective, we want to be picking the simplest, the most credibly neutral tech, and we don't want to be making these hard choices. But now, what you guys pioneered is an industry standard, and it makes the decision so much easier.
Justin, I'm curious from the Ethereum roadmap perspective, what is the next kind of big milestone that you have in mind that we need ZK for? Like, in order to get to why, we need ZK, and that is a big thing that is really impactful for the protocol. It could be at any part of the protocol. Curious, like, what is the big thing that we're waiting for that will be unlocked by, the work from teams like Boundless and others?
Yeah, so I think at this point, people are familiar with the Giga gas frontier and bringing more decentralization. I think two things which are new is, one, this idea of the privacy wormholes. Like, for a very, very long time, Ethereum was saying just do privacy at higher levels of the stack. And I think the technology is becoming mature enough that we can have full end-to-end verification of these systems, so that we have very high confidence that there's literally 0 bugs in those systems. If you rewind the clock and look at Zcash a few years ago, they had this critical bug which allowed anyone to mint the Zcash token and be undetected. And that is extremely scary for Ether, the asset, which is trying to be a monetary asset at global scale. And so we need to have this high conviction on security. And on that point, one of the next big frontiers of kind of ZKVM technology is going to be simplicity. Like Kolmogorov complexity, like how many lines of code is your whole thing? And how amenable is it to formal verification? Because right now we're leaning on client diversity, but in the future, there's definitely a possible outcome, which is that we pick a single ZKVM, we end-to-end formally verify it, and that's the one. And instead of diversity, we lean on formal verification.
Will that be Boundless? Will that be others? We will see. But I appreciate that answer. Curious, Justin, as well, when you're thinking about the recent, let's just say, like shift in mentality within the Ethereum Foundation, as well as just broadly with the sentiment of the community.
Hey, David, nice to meet you.
We've seen,
you're muted,
obviously,
by
the
the way.
institutional adoption of Ethereum. We've seen a lot of these players want to come in and tokenize assets on Ethereum. Fidelity recently just came in, is now looking to challenge BlackRock potentially with their U.S. Treasuries on chain.
Still muted.
And you've mentioned privacy multiple times in this call, and I think this has been something that you've been prioritizing, more recently, as you've said, deeper in the actual Ethereum protocol versus kind of either outsourcing it or putting it at a higher layer of the stack. When you're thinking about the institutional adoption of the Ethereum protocol, what are some of the more important technical lifts that are on the agenda, on the roadmap, that you think are particularly appealing for institutions who would like to allocate to buy ETH, knowing that these are coming, or would like to tokenize assets on ETH or on Ethereum, or are doing things with stable coins, et cetera? When you're looking holistically from the institutional perspective of using Ethereum, what are some of the most important updates? And we may have covered them, but I'm just curious, what are some of the specifics that you think are appealing to large capital allocators who operate within their own set of regulatory environment, within their own set of compliance, et cetera? How are we making Ethereum an institutional friendly protocol?
Yeah, so you're right. There's been a flurry of institutions that have started to look into Ethereum, and one of the common tropes, I guess, is that privacy is a real pain point. And at this point, no one has solved it. But if I were to say something about Ethereum, is that at least it's trying to solve the problem, and it's trying much harder now than it was a year ago. And we also have pioneers like Aztec that have had this large amount of conviction and have been building for over half a decade. Now, in terms of DEF putting more of an emphasis, we just announced a rebrand of PSE. So it used to be Privacy and Scaling Explorations. Now it's Privacy Stewards of Ethereum. And so we're just focusing only on privacy. So that's a team of roughly 50 people. And there's going to be some big announcements related to PSE, possibly some changes to leadership. We're also going to see much more transparency. So right now, the whole Ethereum Foundation is on the org chart, with the notable exception of PSE. We're going to have an org chart for PSE, and we're going to see all of the different sub-projects. And I think this cluster of people, of 50 people, is going to be shifting gears, and I'm hoping for very good things to come up. First of all, in the short term, and be announced at DevConnect, but also looking forward in 2026.
I want to double tap on that. Is like, I'm super excited about anything there, because the reality is that ZK is not going to stop at like scaling blockchains. It is this fundamental game-changing privacy technology for the rest of the world, where I truly believe that, we saw this shift from, like, if we remember, HTTP to HTTPS, that allowed, online payments to happen, allowed more secure business to happen on the internet. I think we're headed for HTTP ZK, and it's going to be just a safer world for everyone to live on the internet. I really view ZK as this counterbalance to AI, the same way you saw like modern key pair cryptography be a counterbalance to this sort of big data movement in the early 2000s.
Absolutely, yeah. HTTPZ is coming, and from a timing perspective, I think it's perfect, because now we have the nation states, the regulators, the institutions comfortable with blockchains. And I think to a large extent, it's because of the lack of privacy. It's because we had full transparency that we were able to get our foot into the door. And it's a little bit like a Trojan horse. And now that, in some sense, we're comfortable in our position, we can start pushing the boundaries with HTTPZ.
Yeah, and like, a little insight here is, many of our team members, they go to open source cryptography conferences, and they go to internet standard conferences. And when they go to these conferences, these are the same conferences that, the early ideas of HTTPS and modern key cryptography have happened. people are describing the properties of ZK in the next generation system. They just don't realize that this technology is coming along so fast. And you see big players like Google starting to use it. You see big players like Facebook and Microsoft have these giant ZK research teams. I think Microsoft has a research team of over 100+ people at this moment. The technology is coming for the internet.
Another topic that institutions are interested in is quantum. Like, they are extremely risk averse, and I basically have a meeting with an institution every week to talk about post-quantum. And the great thing here is that Ethereum is arguably like the most advanced blockchain pushing forward post-quantum cryptography. One of the things that we're doing is looking to replace BLS, which allows for 1 million validator signatures to be aggregated in one single epoch, with a post-quantum equivalent. And here, we're actually using the Snark machinery to do the aggregation of hash-based signatures. And we're in a very privileged position where effectively the vast majority, let's say 90% of the ZKVMs, have hash-based Snarks at their core, and we're able to reuse that technology and enshrine it at Ethereum L1. And this is part of the lean consensus effort that we're working on right now.
Justin, one last thing for you, and I appreciate the institutional focus and just like this kind of framing. It's an interesting paradox where we've built a lot of this open source technology in an industry wide perspective, and people are arguing how institutions are going to come use it, whether they're going to extract all of the value from it, some of the value from it, none of the value from it, how they're going to be kind of planning about it. Regardless, everyone is very clear that everyone needs an institutional strategy. We've obviously got Etherealize, which has been amazing, and we've also and we've seen just guys like Tom Lee and Joe Lubin get out there and put their necks out publicly for everybody. So that's been great. And just to kind of wrap this up, it's obviously Boundless Mainnet Day. I'm not asking you to tell us that Boundless is the best thing since sliced bread, but I'm going to ask you what excites you about the Boundless protocol. Why are you, as a deep Ethereum researcher, excited about the protocol?
Absolutely. So one thing that I'm excited about these proven marketplaces is the opportunity for them to become collaborative in addition to competitive. So right now, the marketplaces is basically an auction house where we can have the most efficient, the most economically efficient provers win out and compete against the less economically efficient ones. What I'm hoping for, and I believe this is something that Boundless has been working on for a while now, is this idea of collaborative marketplaces where you have multiple provers that are working together towards the exact same proof. And the reason why I'm excited about this collaborative aspect is it will allow us to dramatically grow the gas limit. The last 10x might require this collaboration to go from 100 megagas per second to 1 gigagas. And the reason we might need this collaboration is because for decentralization, we're putting this hard constraint on the prover power draw. So we're limiting it to 10 kilowatts. That's the equivalent of a home Tesla charger. And it allows us to have, let's say, 16 GPUs. But if to get to 1 gigagas per second requires, let's say, 64 GPUs, then we might need 4 such clusters to work together to generate the proof. And so just selfishly, from the perspective of Ethereum L1, I'm hoping that we're going to see more of these collaborative aspects.
Justin Drake, our local Bitcoin security researcher in the house. Appreciate your time today, man, and looking forward to more of your talks and just more of the development from the Ethereum side. And thanks for being a part of this awesome day to push Ethereum's ZK efforts forward with Boundless and many of the other ZKVMs. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and look forward to having you back.
Absolutely. And
thanks,
congratulations, Justin. Jacob.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Justin. Speak soon, man.